Billionaire husband acts bankrupt to test his gold digger wife. The ending is shocking. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Caldwell mansion, casting long shadows across the Italian marble floors. Ethan Caldwell stood at the edge of his infinity pool, gazing out at the Pacific Ocean that stretched beyond his cliffside property. At 38, he had everything most men could only dream of: a tech empire valued at billions, houses on 3 continents, a fleet of luxury cars, and a wife whose beauty turned heads wherever they went. Yet, as he watched the waves crash against the rocks below, a hollow feeling gnawed at his chest. "Mr. Caldwell, your coffee?" The housekeeper's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Thank you, Maria." He accepted the cup without turning around. Ethan hadn't always been a billionaire. He'd built his cybersecurity company, Shield Tech, from nothing but student loans and sheer determination. The journey from a small apartment in San Francisco to this Malibu mansion had taken 15 years of 16-hour workdays. His personal life had always taken a back seat to his ambition, until he met Vanessa. 2 years ago, Vanessa Morgan had swept into his life like a hurricane. She was 29 then, a model and social media influencer whose wit matched her striking looks. Their courtship had been a whirlwind: private jets to Paris for dinner, helicopter rides to secluded beaches, yachts cruising the Mediterranean. 6 months later, they were married in a ceremony that made the cover of every major magazine. Ethan took a sip of his coffee, wincing at the bitterness. Lately, he'd begun to question everything about his marriage. The way Vanessa's eyes lit up when he mentioned a new acquisition. How she paraded him at social events like a trophy. The fact that her affection seemed directly proportional to the price of his gifts. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant confirmed that everything was ready. Today was the day he would discover if his suspicions were correct. The sound of high heels clicking against marble announced Vanessa's arrival. She was already dressed in a designer outfit that probably cost more than what many people made in a month. "Good morning, darling," she said, leaning in to plant a kiss on his cheek. Her perfume was intoxicating, a custom scent from a boutique in Paris. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," Ethan replied, studying her face. She was objectively beautiful: high cheekbones, full lips, eyes the color of amber. But lately, he'd started to wonder what lay behind that perfect exterior. "Well, I'm heading to brunch with the girls, then I have that charity committee meeting." She reached for his coffee cup, taking a sip before handing it back with a slight grimace. "Too bitter." "Vanessa," he said, his voice suddenly serious. "I need to talk to you about something." She checked her watch, a platinum Patek Philippe he'd given her for their first anniversary. "Can it wait until dinner? I'm already running late." "No," he said firmly. "It can't." Something in his tone made her pause. She studied him, a flash of concern crossing her face. "What is it?" Ethan took a deep breath. "Let's sit down." He led her to the outdoor seating area, where they sat facing each other on plush loungers. From his pocket, he produced a folded document, a medical report he'd had meticulously fabricated by a film props specialist who owed him a favor. "I've been seeing Dr. Morrison for some tests," he began, watching her reaction carefully. "The results came back yesterday." Vanessa's perfectly manicured fingers took the document, her eyes scanning the medical terminology. "What is this? What's pancreatic cancer? Is this some kind of joke?" Ethan reached for her hand. "I wish it were. Stage 4. Aggressive. The prognosis isn't good." Her face paled, making her makeup stand out starkly against her skin. How long?" 6 months. Maybe a year with treatment." The paper trembled in her hands. "But you're only 38. You're healthy. You go to the gym every day. There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake," Ethan said, looking out at the ocean again. "I've already gotten a second opinion." Vanessa's eyes welled with tears. Were they genuine? He couldn't tell. "What are we going to do?" "I've made some decisions," he continued, watching her closely. "I've decided that when I die, I'm donating my entire fortune to cancer research." "What?" The word came out as a whisper. Every penny. The houses, the cars, the company's shares, all of it. I want my death to mean something. I want to help find a cure so others don't have to go through this. Vanessa stood up abruptly, pacing the deck. But what about me? What am I supposed to do? You'll get a modest stipend, of course. Enough to live comfortably. But not the billions. But Ethan, her voice cracked with emotion, anger? Fear? We're married. Shouldn't we discuss these kinds of decisions? My mind is made up, he said firmly. I've already spoken to my lawyers. She collapsed back onto the lounger, her face in her hands. Through her fingers, she asked, What about treatment? There must be experimental trials, specialists in Switzerland or Germany. I'll try some treatments, he agreed. But the doctors don't seem hopeful. When she finally looked up, tears had streaked her makeup. She crawled onto his lounger and wrapped her arms around him. We'll fight this together, she whispered. I'll be with you every step of the way. Ethan held her, breathing in her expensive perfume, feeling the wetness of her tears on his neck. Was she crying for him, or for the billions slipping through her fingers? The next day, Ethan staged his first treatment visit. He had rented a private room at Cedars-Sinai, bribing a nurse he trusted to corroborate his story if necessary. Vanessa insisted on accompanying him, holding his hand as a doctor friend of his who was in on the ruse explained the treatment plan. She asked questions, took notes, and appeared to be the model of a supportive spouse. But that evening, as she helped him into bed, he had begun to move more slowly, grimacing occasionally as if in pain. He noticed something different. Though her words remained caring, her touch had become perfunctory. She no longer lingered when she kissed him goodnight. And when she thought he was asleep, he caught her staring at him from across the room, her expression not one of sorrow, but of calculation. Over the next few days, Ethan continued his charade. He left pill bottles of vitamins disguised as powerful medications on his nightstand. He made phone calls to fake doctors within earshot. He even lost weight deliberately by following a strict diet and complained of phantom pains to sell the illusion. Vanessa continued to play the role of devoted wife when others were around. She brought him special teas supposedly good for cancer patients. She rearranged his schedule to allow for more rest. She even organized a small dinner with their closest friends where she tearfully explained his condition while holding his hand. But when they were alone, Ethan noticed the mask beginning to slip. She spent less time in their bedroom. Their conversations became shorter, more superficial. She began taking longer shopping trips, leaving him alone with the staff. Twice, he heard her end phone calls abruptly when he entered a room. A week after his announcement, Ethan was reading in his study when their joint credit card app pinged on his phone. A charge for $24,000 at Chanel. 3 hours later, another alert, $18,500 at a luxury jewelry store. By evening, she had spent over $70,000 in a single day. When she returned home loaded with shopping bags, he pretended not to notice. He merely smiled weakly from his position on the couch and asked if she'd had a nice day. Just doing some retail therapy, she said lightly, quickly changing the subject. How are you feeling? Can I get you anything? The distance in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. That night, after she had gone to sleep, Ethan made a call to an old friend from college who now ran a private security firm. I need surveillance equipment, he said quietly. The best you have. And complete discretion. 2 days later, Ethan had hidden cameras installed throughout the mansion while Vanessa was at her weekly spa appointment. Another technician mirrored her phone to a secure server. Ethan knew it was invasive, but he needed evidence. He needed to know if his wife had ever truly loved him, or if she had only loved his money. The stage was set. Now all he had to do was watch the performance unfold. Ethan sat in his home office, staring at the bank of monitors displaying feeds from the hidden cameras throughout the mansion. It had been exactly 1 week since his fabricated diagnosis, and the transformation in Vanessa was both swift and painful to witness. The first alert had come at 3:47 a.m., a notification from his American Express black card showing a $35,000 transfer to Vanessa's personal account. By dawn, she had already booked a weekend getaway to the Hamptons with 3 of her friends. No mention was made to Ethan. Now, watching the center screen, Ethan observed Vanessa in their bedroom. She was on the phone, pacing back and forth in a new outfit he'd never seen before. "I know, Melissa, it's absolutely tragic," she was saying, her voice dripping with rehearsed sympathy. "But honestly, I can't spend every minute playing nurse. I've got to think about my future now." She paused, listening to the response on the other end. "Of course I care about him. But what good does it do either of us if I'm miserable? Besides, he's basically given away everything to charity already. Can you believe that? Not even consulting me." She laughed bitterly. "So yes, I'm going to enjoy what I can now before I'm stuck with nothing but memories and a modest stipend." Ethan's jaw tightened. He switched to another camera feed showing their walk-in closet. Earlier that day, while he was pretending to rest, Vanessa had spent 2 hours selecting designer items, bags, shoes, clothing, and photographing them. A quick check of her mirrored phone revealed she had listed several pieces on a luxury resale site. Some were items he had given her for their anniversary just months ago. The doorbell rang. Ethan switched to the front entrance camera to see a courier delivering another package. The staff had reported 5 deliveries already today. Vanessa's shopping had escalated from occasional splurges to daily binges. His phone buzzed with a credit card alert, $42,000 at a luxury watch dealer. Another buzz followed immediately, $28,500 at an exclusive boutique on Rodeo Drive. Ethan rubbed his temples and switched back to the bedroom camera. Vanessa was now on a video call, twirling to show off a fur coat to someone. With a few keystrokes, he accessed the audio. "It was just sitting in his closet, a gift from some tech CEO in Russia," she was saying. "He'll never even notice it's gone. I figure I can get at least 20 grand for it." The voice on the other end replied. "Won't he be upset?" Vanessa scoffed. "What's he going to do? Yell at the dying man? Besides, I deserve something for myself after all this stress." The coldness in her voice sent a chill through Ethan's body. This was the woman he had married, the woman he had once believed loved him for who he was, not what he owned. On another screen, he watched as Vanessa entered his home office when she thought he was napping. She rifled through his desk drawers, photographing documents. Later, a call to her personal lawyer revealed she was inquiring about their prenuptial agreement's terminal illness clauses. 3 days later, Ethan pretended to be too weak to attend a charity gala they had committed to months ago. Vanessa didn't even try to hide her relief. "You rest, darling," she said, barely meeting his eyes as she fastened diamond earrings he'd given her last Christmas. "I'll represent us both." From his monitoring station, Ethan watched her leave in a new gown, driven by their chauffeur. As soon as the car pulled away, she was on the phone again. "He's getting worse faster than the doctors predicted," she told her friend. "I've got maybe 4 months to figure things out before I'm left with nothing but a pittance." When she returned at 2 a.m., she was tipsy and laughing. The surveillance footage showed her kicking off her heels in the foyer, then pausing to gaze at an original Picasso hanging in the hallway. "You'll fetch a nice price," she whispered to the painting, stroking its frame. The next morning, Ethan found her examining his watch collection while he pretended to sleep. Later that day, his security team confirmed she had contacted 3 separate auction houses. By the end of the second week, Vanessa had maxed out 2 credit cards, booked a girls' trip to the Maldives, and begun quietly moving her favorite pieces of jewelry to a safe deposit box he wasn't supposed to know about. When Ethan mentioned feeling particularly unwell one evening, suggesting they spend some quiet time together, Vanessa checked her watch and frowned. "I would love to, honey, but I promised Alexis I'd meet her for drinks. She's going through such a hard time with her divorce. You understand, right?" Ethan nodded weakly. "Of course. Don't worry about me." As soon as she left, he returned to his monitoring station and pulled up her location on GPS. She wasn't going to meet Alexis. She was heading to the Waldorf Astoria for drinks, exactly where his next test would begin. It was time for Phase 2. The Waldorf Astoria's charity gala for children's cancer research was the perfect setting for the next phase of Ethan's plan. The irony wasn't lost on him as he watched the live feed from the hotel's security cameras, access granted by the hotel's owner, an old friend and business partner. Earlier that day, Ethan had met with Ryan Collins, a struggling actor whose career consisted mainly of commercials and bit parts in indie films. Ethan had discovered him through a casting director who owed him a favor. Remember, Ethan had told Ryan during their briefing at a discreet office downtown. "You're Alexander Devereaux, tech entrepreneur and venture capitalist. You made your first $100 million with an AI startup that was acquired by Google." Ryan nodded, adjusting his custom Tom Ford suit, a vast upgrade from the worn jeans and t-shirt he'd arrived in. "And I just happened to bump into your wife at the bar?" "Exactly. She'll be wearing a red dress. Make it seem coincidental. You're a natural charmer, that's why I chose you. Just be subtle. She needs to think she's pursuing you, not the other way around." Ryan studied the dossier Ethan had prepared on Vanessa, her interests, insecurities, favorite topics. "And you're sure about this, man? Spying on your wife?" Ethan's face hardened. "Just do the job you're being paid for. The wire and camera are non-negotiable." He placed a suitcase on the table. "Half now, half when it's done. Plus the bonus we discussed if she takes the bait." Now, watching from his home office, Ethan saw Vanessa enter the hotel ballroom. True to form, she'd ignored his advice to not overdo it, and had chosen a crimson Valentino gown with a plunging neckline. Every eye in the room turned toward her as she sauntered to the bar, already playing the part of the soon-to-be widow. Right on cue, Ryan appeared in the camera frame, casually leaning against the bar 2 seats away from Vanessa. Ethan activated the audio feed connected to Ryan's hidden microphone. "Macallan 25, neat," Ryan ordered, his voice carrying just enough to catch Vanessa's attention. She glanced his way, then did a double take. Ryan was handsome in a rugged way that contrasted sharply with Ethan's more refined appearance. "Good choice," she said, raising her champagne flute slightly. "Though personally, I prefer the 30. Ryan turned, feigning surprise at being addressed. His eyes widened appreciatively as he took in her appearance. "A woman who knows her Scotch. Now I'm intrigued." Their conversation flowed easily, too easily for Ethan's comfort. Ryan played his part perfectly, dropping hints about his wealth while maintaining an air of mystery. When he mentioned his spontaneous trip to Monaco last weekend on his private jet, Vanessa's eyes lit up with the same sparkle Ethan had once mistaken for love when directed at him. "I don't believe I caught your name," Ryan said after 20 minutes of flirtatious banter. "Vanessa. Vanessa Caldwell." She extended her hand, which Ryan kissed rather than shook. "Alexander Devereaux. Pleasure to meet you, Vanessa." A flash of recognition crossed her face. "Wait, Devereaux Technologies? The AI company that sold to Google last year?" Ryan smiled modestly. "You follow the tech world?" "My husband does," she said, her voice cooling slightly. "He's in tech too." "And where is this lucky man tonight?" Ryan asked, glancing around theatrically. Vanessa's smile faltered. "Home. He's not well." "I'm sorry to hear that," Ryan said with practiced concern. "It's terminal," she added, dropping her voice. "He doesn't have long." Ethan felt his stomach clench watching her use his fabricated illness as a pickup line. Ryan's performance, however, remained flawless, expressing just the right amount of sympathy before gently changing the subject. By the end of the evening, they had exchanged phone numbers. Vanessa's body language had transformed completely, leaning in, touching Ryan's arm, laughing at his jokes. It was the same routine she had once used on Ethan when they first met. 3 days later, Vanessa told Ethan she was meeting her support group for spouses of terminal patients. The GPS tracker on her phone led straight to a secluded restaurant in Malibu where Ryan was waiting. Their second meeting was even more intimate. Hidden cameras captured every moment as Ryan presented her with an expensive bracelet, courtesy of Ethan's budget, and spun tales of his lavish lifestyle. "I've been thinking about buying a villa in Santorini," he told her as they sipped wine on the restaurant's terrace. "Sometimes I just need to get away from it all, you know." "That sounds heavenly," Vanessa sighed. "I used to travel all the time before." She trailed off, gesturing vaguely. "Before your husband's illness," Ryan finished. "It must be difficult being tied down like that." "You have no idea," she said, her voice hardening. "Especially now that he's decided to give everything away. Can you believe that? Not even considering what might happen to me." Ryan reached for her hand. "You deserve better." In his home office, Ethan watched as Vanessa's eyes welled with tears, the same performance she had given him countless times. "I never really loved him," she confessed to Ryan. "It was always about the lifestyle." "Is that terrible to admit?" "Not to me," Ryan assured her. "We can't help who we are." As their meetings increased in frequency, Ethan compiled a video archive of every damning statement. Each confession, each betrayal, each moment of disloyalty was time-stamped and logged with clinical precision. The pieces were falling into place. Soon, it would be time for the final act. 3 weeks into the charade, Ethan sat in his private screening room, reviewing the latest footage of Vanessa and Ryan. His face remained impassive, but the slight tremor in his hands betrayed the turmoil within. What had begun as a test had transformed into a nightmare far worse than he'd anticipated. On the screen, Vanessa and Ryan reclined on a daybed at an exclusive beach club in Malibu. It was their 5th meeting, and any pretense of restraint had vanished. Vanessa wore a barely there bikini and oversized sunglasses, sipping a martini at 11 a.m. while Ethan supposedly underwent another treatment. "I spoke to my financial advisor yesterday," Ryan was saying, his hand casually resting on Vanessa's thigh. "The Santorini property is available if we want it." Ethan noted the word, "we," with a grimace. "That sounds perfect," Vanessa purred. "I've always wanted a place in the Greek islands." "When could you get away?" Ryan asked, toying with the strap of her bikini. Vanessa sighed dramatically. "That's the problem, isn't it? Ethan's getting worse every day. The doctor says it could be another 3 months, but honestly, who knows? These things can drag on." The clinical detachment in her voice made Ethan's blood run cold. "Must be hard," Ryan said, his tone carefully sympathetic while his hand continued its explorations. "Watching someone waste away like that. It's exhausting," Vanessa agreed, taking another long sip of her drink. "And for what? So he can donate everything to strangers? Do you know what he told me yesterday? He wants me to help set up his foundation before he dies. As if I have nothing better to do than paperwork for money I'll never see." Ryan leaned closer. "Have you considered alternatives?" "What do you mean?" Vanessa asked, though her tone suggested she understood perfectly. "Well," Ryan said, lowering his voice, "these situations don't always have to proceed at nature's pace." There was a pause. Ethan held his breath. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" Vanessa whispered, not sounding nearly as shocked as she should have. Ryan shrugged. "I'm just saying there are ways to ease suffering. To help nature along. Especially when someone's already in pain." In his screening room, Ethan felt physically ill. He'd expected disloyalty, even infidelity. But this conversation was veering into territory far darker than he'd imagined. "I couldn't," Vanessa said, but her denial lacked conviction. "Though, his medications are quite strong. The doctors have warned about the dangers of incorrect dosages." "You're just thinking of him," Ryan said smoothly. "No one wants to suffer needlessly." Vanessa was quiet for a moment, twirling the stem of her glass. "Even if, and I'm not saying I would, but even if something happened sooner rather than later, the money would still go to charity. He's already signed everything over." "Has he?" Ryan asked. "Legal documents can be complicated, especially when someone's mental state is compromised by medication and illness." Ethan watched as understanding dawned on Vanessa's face. You mean, have him change his will while he's medicated? That wouldn't hold up in court. Not a new will, Ryan said. Just a small addition. A transfer of foundation control, perhaps. After all, who better to manage his legacy than his devoted wife? The smile that spread across Vanessa's face chilled Ethan to the bone. That's actually brilliant, she said, sitting up straighter. He's been talking about putting me on the board anyway. It wouldn't be suspicious at all if he signed control over to me. It would seem like he was just making sure his wishes were carried out. And once you control the foundation... Ryan left the sentence hanging. Once I control the foundation, we can ensure the money goes to the most deserving causes. Vanessa finished, trailing her fingers up Ryan's arm. The next day, Ethan pretended to be particularly unwell, spending most of the day in bed. Vanessa was unusually attentive, bringing him tea and offering to read to him. When she suggested that they should talk about the foundation structure, while he still had good days, he nearly lost his composure. I was thinking, she said, sitting at the edge of their bed, that you should consider putting me in charge of the foundation. I know how important this is to you, and I want to make sure everything goes exactly as you wish. The concern in her eyes would have seemed genuine to anyone who hadn't witnessed her beach conversation the day before. That's thoughtful, Ethan managed. I'll have my lawyers draw something up. No need, Vanessa said quickly. I took the liberty of having something prepared. Just a simple document giving me authority over the foundation's assets. So I can honor your wishes. She produced a document from her purse. If he signed it, he would essentially be handing her control of billions. You've thought of everything, Ethan said softly. I just want what's best for you, she replied, offering him a pen. For us. Ethan's hand trembled, but not from weakness. From rage. The final piece of evidence was now in place. Could we do this tomorrow? He asked. I'm feeling quite tired right now. Vanessa's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, darling. There's no rush. We have time. But they didn't. Because Ethan had already sent invitations for dinner the following evening, to both their families. It was time for the endgame. The dining room of the Caldwell mansion glowed with the warm light of crystal chandeliers. A long mahogany table had been set with the finest china, silver, and crystal, a table that could seat 20 but tonight held just 8, Ethan's parents, Robert and Eleanor Caldwell, his sister, Claire, and her husband, and Vanessa's mother, Patricia Morgan, along with her stepfather and younger brother. Ethan had presented the evening to Vanessa as a farewell dinner, a chance to gather their closest family before his condition deteriorated further. She had embraced the idea enthusiastically, seeing it as another opportunity to cement her role as the devoted, grieving wife. Now, as servants carried in trays of perfectly prepared food, Ethan watched Vanessa from the head of the table. She was radiant in a conservative black dress, appropriate for the somber occasion, with her hair swept up in an elegant chignon. To anyone who didn't know better, she appeared the picture of loving concern, periodically touching his hand and asking if he was comfortable. You're too good to me, Ethan told her, loud enough for everyone to hear. Her practiced smile never wavered. The first 2 courses passed with subdued conversation. Ethan's parents, who had flown in from Boston, were visibly struggling to maintain their composure. His mother's eyes were perpetually rimmed with red, while his father, a normally stoic man, seemed to have aged a decade since hearing the news. Vanessa's family was less affected. Her mother, a former model herself, kept directing the conversation toward plans for the foundation, barely disguising her interest in how the money would be managed. Before dessert, Ethan announced, rising shakily to his feet. I'd like to say a few words. He reached for his water glass, ignoring the wine. First, I want to thank you all for being here. Family means everything, especially in times like these. Murmurs of agreement circled the table. Vanessa dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. I've been blessed in so many ways, Ethan continued. Success beyond what I ever dreamed. But my greatest blessing. He turned to Vanessa. has been finding true love. She reached for his hand, squeezing it tenderly. Her wedding ring, a flawless 10-carat diamond, caught the light. When you're facing the end, Ethan said, his voice growing stronger, you reflect on what matters. On who was there for you, not just in good times, but in the darkest moments. Claire, his sister, was openly crying now. Even Vanessa's stepfather looked uncomfortable. That's why, Ethan continued, I want to share something with all of you. A revelation, you might say. He pressed a small remote in his pocket. The lights dimmed slightly, and a hidden projector hummed to life, illuminating the white wall at the end of the dining room. What's this, darling? Vanessa asked, her smile faltering slightly. Just a little presentation I've been working on, Ethan replied. About loyalty and truth. The first image appeared on the wall, Vanessa at the Waldorf bar with Ryan, leaning in close, laughing. Then another, the two of them holding hands at the beach club. And another, Vanessa kissing Ryan in his car. A shocked gasp went up around the table. Vanessa's face drained of color. Ethan, I can explain, she began. Please do, he said calmly, pressing the remote again. This time, audio filled the room, Vanessa's voice, crystal clear. I never loved him, it was always about the lifestyle. Robert Caldwell stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. What is the meaning of this? But Ethan wasn't done. The next clip played, Vanessa and Ryan discussing how to help nature along with his medication. Then her plans to take control of the foundation. Patricia Morgan put her hand to her mouth. Vanessa, tell me you didn't. Vanessa stood now too, trembling with rage or fear, perhaps both. These are fake, manipulated. He's obviously lost his mind from the disease. About that, Ethan said, pressing the remote one final time. The wall now displayed a medical report, but not the fabricated one he had shown Vanessa. This one was a comprehensive health assessment dated just 3 days ago, showing Ethan in perfect health. I'm not dying. Never was. But this marriage is. The silence that followed was absolute. Vanessa stared at him, her mouth opening and closing without producing sound. You, fake cancer? Her mother finally managed. I needed to know the truth, Ethan replied simply. About who I married. You lied to everyone, Vanessa hissed, finding her voice at last. You manipulated me. Did I? Ethan asked softly. Did I force you to cheat? To plot to take my money? To consider hastening my death? At that moment, Ryan entered from the side door. But he wasn't the Ryan that Vanessa knew. Gone was the confident swagger of the wealthy entrepreneur. In his place stood a nervous young man in jeans and a plain t-shirt. This is the real Ryan Collins, Ethan said. A struggling actor who was paid to play a part. Just like you've been playing a part since the day we met. Ryan nodded awkwardly at the stunned faces around the table, then carefully removed his microphone and placed it on the table. I'm sorry, Mr. Caldwell, he said quietly. I didn't realize how far she would take it. With a slight nod to Ethan, he walked out, leaving Vanessa standing alone, frozen in place, as the weight of her exposure crashed down around her. It was all a misunderstanding, Vanessa pleaded, her voice echoing through the marble foyer of the Caldwell mansion. 3 days had passed since the disastrous dinner, and she had returned to collect her belongings. Ethan stood with his arms crossed, watching dispassionately as she attempted to salvage what couldn't be repaired. You've been under so much stress with the company, she continued, her voice taking on the sympathetic tone she had perfected over the years. And those medications the doctors gave you, they clearly affected your judgment. We can work through this, darling. My judgment has never been clearer, Ethan replied coldly. The security team has packed your personal items. Everything else stays. Vanessa's facade cracked. You can't do this to me. I'm your wife. Not for much longer, Ethan said, handing her a thick envelope. These are divorce papers. My lawyers will contact yours. Her eyes narrowed as she snatched the envelope. You think you've won? I'm entitled to half of everything. California is a community property state. For the first time since the dinner, Ethan smiled. You might want to review our prenuptial agreement. Section 12, Paragraph 4, the Infidelity Clause. And Section 15, the clause covering malicious intent resulting in potential physical harm. Vanessa's face paled. No court will uphold that. You tricked me. Did I trick you into discussing how to speed up my death through medication? Did I force you to tell Ryan you never loved me? Ethan shook his head. The prenup is ironclad. You leave with what you came with, which, as I recall, was a maxed-out credit card and a leased BMW. Outside, a car horn honked impatiently. That would be your mother, Ethan said. She mentioned something about you staying in her guest room until you figure things out. Vanessa's composure finally shattered completely. You'll regret this, she hissed. I'll tell everyone what you did, how you lied about having cancer. Your reputation will be ruined. By all means. Ethan gestured toward the door. Tell the world how your husband pretended to be dying, and your response was to max out his credit cards, cheat on him, and plot to hasten his death for financial gain. I'm sure public opinion will be firmly on your side. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. 2 security guards appeared, carrying designer suitcases toward the waiting car. I did love you once, she said quietly, a final attempt at manipulation. Ethan didn't respond. He simply walked to the door and held it open. As the car carrying Vanessa disappeared down the driveway, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The entire charade had been exhausting, but necessary. Not just to expose Vanessa, but to show himself the truth he had been unwilling to see. 6 months later, Ethan stood on a stage at the grand opening of the Caldwell Institute for Cancer Research. Cameras flashed as he cut the ceremonial ribbon, officially dedicating the $500 million research facility that would house some of the world's leading oncologists and research scientists. My own brush with mortality, albeit a fabricated one, gave me perspective, he told the assembled crowd. We all have limited time. The question is what we do with it. The story of his fake cancer diagnosis and his ex-wife's betrayal had indeed made headlines, but not as Vanessa had hoped. Instead of painting Ethan as manipulative, the press had largely portrayed him as a man who had gone to extreme lengths to uncover the truth. The recordings of Vanessa discussing how to hasten his death had particularly turned public opinion against her. After the ceremony, as Ethan mingled with donors and researchers, a young woman approached him. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a clipboard. Mr. Caldwell? I'm Emma Chun from Volunteer Services. I wanted to thank you personally for the community outreach program you funded. It's already making a difference for families affected by cancer. Ethan smiled, struck by the genuine warmth in her eyes. I should be thanking you. The volunteers are the heart of this operation. Would you like to see what we've been doing? We're hosting a support group this afternoon for children whose parents are undergoing treatment. For the first time in months, Ethan felt something stir within him, something genuine and unexpected. I'd like that very much. 2 years to the day after Ethan had revealed the truth at that fateful dinner, he sat in a small cafe in downtown Los Angeles. Across from him, Emma laughed at something he said, her engagement ring catching the light. Through the window, he spotted a familiar figure. Vanessa was crossing the street, dressed in the polyester uniform of a mid-tier clothing store. She carried shopping bags for customers and looked utterly miserable. Isn't that? Emma asked, following his gaze. Yes, Ethan said simply. Do you regret it? Any of it? Ethan considered the question. The deception, the surveillance, the elaborate trap, none of it reflected the man he wanted to be. And yet, without it all, he might still be living a lie. I regret that it was necessary, he said finally. But not the truth it revealed. As they paid the bill and left the cafe, Ethan heard snatches of conversation from a nearby table. That's him, the billionaire who exposed his gold-digging wife on video. I heard she's working retail now while he's running that big cancer charity. Serves her right. You can't fake love. Ethan smiled to himself as he took Emma's hand. No, you couldn't fake love. But sometimes you had to fake other things to discover what was real.